I actually recently joined the NHS.
We understand burnout and that is a very real thing.
I just realised that environment wasn't for me. The whole NHS abides by the people promise, which one of the pillars is we are always learning.
Thank you guys for joining us on this episode of A Nurse Like Me. Today we are interviewing a renowned consultant. She's also works for the NHS, Mrs. Ruth A. Martey. Please, Ruth, can you introduce yourself for us?
Hi, thank you so much, Nzi, for having me here today. My name is Ruth Agyemang Martey. I've known Nzi for many, many years. So I actually recently joined the NHS in my career, and I believe there's many more career opportunities within the NHS, which I believe we'll be exploring today.
What exactly is your job title or your job role within the NHS?
I work in the HR department, specifically within organizational development. So that's where I work in. So it's organizational development and design. So it looks at designing, programs that will then become business as usual within the organization. So these include things such as your PDRs, for example, your personal development review. We're looking at to ensure that it is optimized to a way that serves staff members. We work on projects such as retire and return. So there's so many projects that organizational development design looks at, and which is made to optimize the organization to serve its purpose.
And when you say that you work with people on personal development, because that's something that somebody else that I interviewed mentioned, and I just wanted to kind of gain, I suppose, your perspective on it. What exactly does that look like when it comes to HR and personal development within that area? So let's say you have a nurse, and I know that you've obviously worked with nurses. What do you do to help them in like that aspect of personal development?
So that depends on each organization within the NHS, but predominantly, the whole NHS abides by the people promise, which one of the pillars is we are always learning. So we do want to encourage staff members to develop themselves, grow within the NHS, and progress within the NHS. So as a nurse, you would have a PDR, so a personal development review, that's done every year, looking at your objectives for the year and potentially, if you want to progress, what you need to do in order to progress. So if you have a really great manager, and sorry to say, but it really comes down to whether you have a good manager who supports you in your development, or you're in a place where it is not really fostered. But if you have a really great manager and you're able to have an open communication and say, I am a band 5 or I'm a band 6 and I want to move to a band 7, for instance, or even I want to niche into this division of nursing, how can I get there? And a good manager will work with you, set objectives that will allow you to meet those requirements.
I love the fact that you touched on that, because many people are going to be like, well, what about if you don't have a great manager? So what about if you don't have a great manager? And a lot of the times, some people don't even have managers that promote that personal development aspects of things and push them towards growing within the NHS. It's kind of just, you're just at a band 5, you're going to stay at a band 5. But what if you've got somebody that, maybe is being overlooked, but they want to develop their skill set, they want to grow, and they want to progress within the NHS? What advice would you give them?
Yeah. So your personal growth is very much a journey that you have to take ownership of. Yes, having a great manager is good, but you ultimately are going to have to take ownership of it. So I work within organizational development, but within my role, I work within staff retention. And in my role, I identified that we had a gap. So we didn't have career coaching, for instance, and I've had many staff members reach out to me, saying they want to progress, but they're not able to. So I was able to coach them into what steps to take, but they had to take that initiative to come forward and look for coaching, because they could have chosen to just stay there and be like, okay, I don't have a great manager, so I'm just staying there. So take ownership of your journey. So coaching is one option. Another option is to really study the job description of what you're looking for. So if you are a band 5 and you're looking to get to a band 6, you don't even need to have your own trusts job description. You can literally type in Google band 6 nurse and look at the job description, and it will tell you the essential and the desirables. And then you can look, okay, I take this, okay, I like here. So how can I get experience in the areas that I like, or how can I obtain that course that I need to really demonstrate that? And there's no harm in starting to apply. If you feel like I'm ready, I've already, practiced as a band 6, there's no harm in applying in it to other trusts as well.
Brilliant. So what I got from that was, don't be afraid to get coaching, but the main thing is that your growth is your responsibility alone. So your manager, I suppose, can support that, but your progression is predominantly your responsibility. So don't wait for someone to cultivate it, but look to be proactive in developing yourself and going after the roles that you want to go after. So if that's a band 7, band 8, be proactive in studying the job description and applying for those roles.
100%.
Brilliant. Can you tell me what your background is, Ruth? So you got into HR, but how did you get into that? Where did you develop those skills to go into that? What's your background?
Okay, my background is very diverse. I started in law, and that's actually where I met lovely Nzi. We studied law together in our undergraduate degree, and took on the natural progression into working in a law firm. But I just realized that environment wasn't for me. I like to think more outside of the box, be a bit more creative. So I ended up in consulting and then moved into commissioning. And then one day I just saw this role, and it talked about, being able to use your initiative and really, using your creativity and innovation to improve something that is bad. And to me, that speaks to me because I'm very solution driven. And so I just applied, and one could have said that, oh, she doesn't have any HR background. Nevertheless, NHS background, no, I don't. But with all of those skills combined, they saw, okay, this person will be perfect for this role. And so I've been in my role for 3 years now, and thoroughly enjoy being able to be creative and innovative.
I love the fact that you mentioned you didn't have NHS background. That means you didn't have any healthcare experience. You were not a support worker. You were not a nurse. You didn't do any kind of midwifery course, occupational therapy, but still you were able to work within HR for the NHS. And you didn't even have a HR background as well. So I love that. I love the fact that your skills were transferable and you were able to utilize your experience working in a law firm, working in commissioning, you mentioned, and bring that all within the NHS. And I know that is something that they value a lot, that transfer of skills from different backgrounds. Do you work with nurses? So let's say your teammates, are they some of them that are nurses, or are they all from different backgrounds and there's no nurses whatsoever?
So the majority of the staff members I actually work with have been nurses and occupational therapists. For instance, I work with the head of Wellbeing, and she was an occupational health therapist. I work with the EDI ambassador, Equality, Diversity, Inclusion ambassador. He was a HCA once. I work with the anti-racism lead, and she also was a nurse for 20 years. And they've all moved to corporate HR And as far as I'm aware, I didn't actually conduct any courses or training, but just naturally progressed into that area.
That is why I asked, because I think when we're trained about positions that we can apply for as nurses, we don't think anti-racism lead, we don't think head of well-being, we don't think about those roles that are not so much acute or clinical roles, but still our experience as nurses can be greatly valued in positions like that, because we understand, like, let's say we're talking about head of well-being, we understand burnout, and that is a very real thing that nurses face. We understand the challenges that some of the support workers, nurses, occupational therapists have to go through on the wards. I mean, working in an acute ward, I saw doctors fainting because they were so tired of doing long rotational shifts. So I think it's brilliant to have conversations like this, because it highlights the different areas that people can take in their career paths. And I love the fact that, again, going back to what you said about take ownership of your growth. I love that, because it's taking ownership of the career that you want to be in the pathway is yours to design. It doesn't have to be conventional. Within the NHS, there are roles that are created for nurses. It's very clear to see that sometimes, based on a person's skill set, they will huddle and create a role. So, like, for example, anti-racism lead, that has had to come from somewhere. They have seen an issue and decided that they are going to create a role to tackle that issue, you know. So I love the fact that you work with a diverse group of people. And one thing that I've seen as a common theme between you all is that you've not had to have experience going for the roles that you've gone through. That is just incredible to see. Just kind of touching again on your commissioning experience. What exactly is commissioning? If someone is looking to get into that area, what is it? And what did you have to do to get into that?
So I think law in general is a very it's a degree that's extremely applicable to many areas. So I would say definitely having a law degree helped with that, because as a commissioner, you have to be very analytical. So just to explain what a commissioner is, so a commissioner will either work, you know, within the CQC, or work with the council, work with hospitals, and basically commission projects, commission packages. So for example, a social worker has maybe 20 people that they're looking after, and for each they need packages. So the commissioner will basically allocate the monies for or if there's a project, for instance, there's a big project on mental health going on everywhere at the moment, and maybe you know, someone wants to open up a mental health center, that will be commissioned by the council, by the commissioners. So they will look at how much does it cost, what would be the benefit for the population, and then at the end of the commissioning cycle, which is usually a year or so, they would have to come and report, you know, was it successful, how many lives were improved, what is the feedback. So it's basically a position that kind of looks at projects that are happening within the population, whether it's serving the population. Commissioning is one of those roles where I think you just need to have a vast background, because you have to be open-minded and be analytical and curious.
One of the things as well that I'm hoping to do with this podcast is create an awareness of social care. For people who don't know what social care is basically the area where you're helping people to develop their independence, and commissioners are a big part of that, because like you say, they allocate funds for projects, for activities. And so can a nurse apply to be a commissioner?
I'm sure you can, because interestingly, and again, that's why I say it's very important to study job descriptions, and literally just searching for it and having a look. There's no degree for commissioning. If you can demonstrate that you've got an understanding of the public, which you do as a nurse, if you can demonstrate that you can, you know, analyze, work under pressure, which you can as a nurse, just show that you've got the applicable skills that you can transfer into the role, it's a why not. So definitely, I would say so.
And going back to kind of something you said study the job description. How can one study a job description? Where do they start? What do they do?
So when I say study a job description, you would already kind of have in mind what you're looking for. So as the example I gave, if, for instance, you are a band 5 nurse and you want to go into a band 6 nurse, you literally type into Google or Indeed or any job search website, band 6 nurse, and then you look at the requirements and responsibilities, and then you look at where you are at now and how you match with that. And if you find that there are gaps that you do not match, then you work on achieving those. Again, also, if you want to niche into different sectors, for instance, like OD or Wellbeing, there's so many roles. There are nurse education practitioners out there, which I don't hear many people speak of those job roles. They are there as well. They are band 7s, so they get good pay too. Literally typing that job into Google, even if it's not an active listing, there will be archive listings out there that you can just study and see, okay, maybe this is something I would want to go in for next.
Thank you. Thank you so much. One of the things I wanted to ask, as an organizational development specialist, what exactly do you do? So I know you obviously work within the NHS, but what exactly does that role entail? And also, where can that take you? So working as an OD, where can that take you?
Okay, so again, OD sits within HR, and so the main goal of within OD is to improve the organization. And because this specific sector is within HR and looks at staff experience, so OD includes equality, diversity, and inclusion. It includes well-being, includes analyzing staff survey. So things that I do is I do love staff engagement. So I engage with staff through feedback questionnaires, one-to-one conversations, focus groups, looking at overall data to see, staff satisfaction, and then looking at areas that we are lacking to then improve. So, for example, if the PDRs, for instance, are having negative feedback, we will now look at how can we improve this particular area to serve the people. So it's a constant, you have to be a curious person, basically. You have to constantly wanting to improve. Continuous improvement is very important. So it's not a boring job at all, because you're basically constantly trying to find improvements. So you have to be happy with changes and be excited about potential changes, because with changes comes opportunity. And people who work in OD, they tend to go into various roles, actually. So the more senior roles that people would go to, sometimes people will branch into HR business partners or director of OD, head of OD, all the way up to chief people officer and CEOs. So so there's a vast niches that you can go into and skill sets that you gain from.
And since you work in the NHS and you've got experience working in adult social care, what are some of the challenges that you've seen or you've observed?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so one of the challenges I've definitely observed is the high turnover that that are being experienced within those sectors. So healthcare has really high turnover, and other social care in terms of social workers, because of the nature of the role. The roles are very tasking, very demanding on your body and your mind. And one would argue, compared to the private sector, is not as well paid. So one of the things that I've, it says please cut that part, yeah. Yeah. So one of the things that I particularly found interested in is how can we optimize the workforce in order to retain staff. And so I created Train, Retain Talent Consultancy, where we help organizations optimize their workforce in order to retain their best talent. Sometimes it's not just about pay, but it's about reinvesting in your staff. Organizations, whenever an organization replaces a staff member, they make a loss of £30,000 per replacement. So that money is better reinvested into your staff, to retain them and have them stay long, have them stay and invest into the organization. So as within Train, Retain Talent, we offer consultancy services for organizations. So we come in and we basically do a sense check of your workforce. How is your staff feeling? If you're experiencing high turnover within, your sector, what is the strategy that we can develop for you to improve the turnover? And on average, within Train, Retain Talent, we have seen 50% reduction of turnover for our clients. So that's one thing I'm really passionate about, is optimizing the workforce. Yeah.
And when you say turnover, are you talking about retention turnover? So the people staying within the organizations?
So turnover is the figure of people leaving, and then the retention is how many people are staying. And within adult social care, there is extreme, 40% turnover within adult social care, which is very high. The target should be 14% ideally for every organization. So 40% is quite high, but we have a set of specialist consultants that can come in, help work with you, see how we can support your staff to stay and help you save money, basically, because you invest in your staff and you ideally also want them to invest back into you, and how you will not lose them to the competition. So there's loads of stuff that we have to.
That is very valuable, because a lot of the adult social care suppliers, they are very small businesses who don't even have recruitment teams. They have to hire external recruitment providers to help bring in staff. And a lot of the time, they're not good quality staff. And that's the other issue that people are faced with, is that they are recruiting, because retention is an issue, not just within the NHS, but I see this as an issue within the private sector as well, because a lot of people were hiring international workers. And when the law changed, that meant that we lost a lot of people. And so how do we retain the ones we've got? And how actually do you source quality staff? And that's always been an issue, is they can recruit people, but recruiting and retaining quality staff is very difficult. And part of the issue is, again, around wages and salary. Some people that are brilliant, they will leave somewhere because it's too stressful, and they'll go and work somewhere else for more pay and less service users. So I think you've got a brilliant company there, because you're looking at challenging those issues that smaller companies, smaller providers face. And that is something that CQC is going to love. I think having, someone from your service come in and look at the staffing levels, look at how you can train, develop, and help those organizations retain quality workers is going to help tremendously, especially when it comes to that aspect of well-led, a service that is well-led. They look at your staffing, and not only just that, but they look at the HR aspects of things. And I love that you've developed an organization that looks at how to benefit and develop the workforce. Because I think that is really, really needed in this period of time that we're in. What does someone have to do to kind of inquire about your service? Where do they go if they want to find out a bit more about how your organization can come and support them?
Yeah, so we are we can be found on every social media platform under Train Retain Talent, as well as www.trainretaintalent.co.uk, and our contacts is info@trainretaintalent.co.uk. So we do offer quotes. We can do an initial consultation with myself or our consultants, and inquire whether it's an away day you would like. Maybe you feel like your staff are really exhausted. We offer workshops that we can work with your staff members to revive them. We offer training for managers, and we offer bespoke consultancy service bespoke to your organization. So yeah, just reaching out, that'll be the best way to get in touch.
In relation to that salary aspect, people are trying to meet a standard that is just unattainable under the funds that they have within that organization. If you think about the living wage is £13.45, the national wage, the national minimum wage is £12, around £12.45 or 41, something like that. The council or the local authority per hour, their rate could be £18.50, let's say. Within that £18.50, you've got to pay either the national living wage, the national minimum wage, pay yourself within that, pay for any resources that you've had to undertake running your business alone. You're probably going to be at a loss. You see what I'm saying? And if you're looking at that, and with people that don't have staffing, they're having to hire agency, and those agencies can say to them, right, we will take out of your £18.50, £17 per hour. That is even unheard of, because they'll probably ask for a bit more. That means that after you've paid the agency £17 per hour, you're left with £1.50 to pay yourself and anything else. It's just a real issue that people don't often talk about. Yep. Another thing is around hours and getting kind of the social element of things. So your commissioners and the social workers to agree or increase hours for people. When those things are not done, the issue is the staff then get burnt out and they leave, and that's why I love the fact that you're talking about the service that you provide, because what we want to do is find those gaps. Why are they leaving? How can we resolve that particular issue and prevent them from leaving? And sometimes providing like a well-being service that they can call when they find themselves at that breaking point can be your saving grace between them putting in a resignation, putting in notice and saying they're leaving, and them actually having a proper think about, for my career and where I want to go, does it benefit me to leave? Because quitting doesn't really benefit the worker. Because, when you quit, you forfeit your benefits. You forfeit your entitlements. Whereas when you're fired, you're still entitled to whatever you would be until the end of that month. So there's a lot of things there that are going against those managers. What would you say to those managers in order to kind of give them a bit of hope? And again, and I know that your service probably looks at that as well, but what would you say is the first thing they need to look at or think about when it comes to retaining staff?
Yes, just as you were describing that, actually it brought me back to my commissioning days at that time when it came to negotiating the recommissioning of a package, and we had so many care home owners saying, we are stretched to the max, we need more money. And as you said about the increase, that the council is behind, because they're a year behind always of inflation. So you are always a little bit at a loss, definitely. And so I definitely do hear your pain if that is your situation. It is a painful situation. But as you rightly said, Train Retain Talent looks at reinvesting in your staff. The amount of staff members that we've heard from, they said, I feel like after acquiring our services and going through a workshop, in pouring into their staff members by doing engagement exercises with them, looking at really having a succession plan as well. Even if your organization is small, as a manager, you can put succession planning in place. There's so many organizations I've come to where, for instance, they had 3 band 3s and 1 band 4 as a supervisor, and they were just doing their role, but there was no way for them to ever progress unless that band 4 left. And so those staff members, they were just there, but they had no aspiration. They couldn't aspire to get any further within the organization. Only way was to move away because there's no succession planning in place. And so we work together with organizations to put succession planning in place. So look at ways that you can motivate your staff outside of salary. You know, sometimes also just knowing the prospects of, okay, in the next 2 years, I can become manager. This is a real thing that can happen because perhaps you've put in place a band 3, band 4, band 5, you know, in a way that there is a clear succession plan. Then staff members are more inclined to stay. You know, again, an away day, you know, an away day does not have to be costly, but brings so much back to the staff member and feeling, oh my God, this organization cares about me. You know, yes, it's hard when I come in, there's a lot of work to do, the salary is not that great, but the way I'm treated here, I feel valued. And that's a big thing. Feeling valued is massive. You can stick through a horrible time if you feel valued, but you can be in a place that is lovely, but you don't feel valued, you don't feel appreciated and leave. So as a manager, however way you can motivate your staff members outside of salary, because there's so many different avenues that can be taken to motivate staff, to let them feel valued, that they will actually stay and say, yeah, I do see myself staying here. I can contribute positively to this organization because the organization also gets back to me.
Thank you so much. You've hit on a lot of good points there. Feeling valued is very important. It really helps staff to feel energized and motivated. So thank you for sharing that. And I think there are very small ways in which managers can make their staff feel valued. Sometimes people just want recognition for things that they do. And I think a lot of the time, support workers that I certainly speak to, they just want that little bit of appreciation or recognition for moments where they've stepped beyond their role as support workers and they've done a bit more than what they should do. They feel as though when it's overlooked, it takes away their value. So thank you for bringing that. I think that is really, really key. You mentioned a succession plan and you spoke a little bit about that, but for people who've never heard of that term, what exactly is a succession plan?
The succession plan is a strategy that organizations can put in place to, number one, retain knowledge. So especially the UK is a lot based on knowledge-based skills. So for instance, a band 3 that has been there for years, or let's say a band 6 that has been in his role for years, and if that person leaves, they leave with the knowledge they have gained, they leave with the skills that they have gained. But if there's a succession plan in place, that knowledge is passed down. So the pyramid example I was giving, or the staircase example I was giving, is that if there is a band 6 who is a supervisor of a band 5, the band 5 is a supervisor of a band 4, for instance, the band 3 is learning from the band 4, the band 4 is learning from the band 5, the band 5 is learning from the band 6, so that as they progress, the knowledge is transferred. Additionally, it creates motivation for the staff member because one of every human desire is to develop. It's an intrinsic human need to develop and to progress. And so it aspires people to be able to look forward to an attainable goal that they can look forward to. And in such, the organization is also enriching itself because you're gaining more skilled people every day. So every day that they are training with that supervisor, they become more skilled. And so it's a good strategy to put in place, because then it will help reduce turnover, again, as it motivates staff, and then also helps the organization retain intelligence that you could have lost and skills you could have lost.
I think you've summarized it so lovely, and there are a few things that stood out to me, but it took me back to thinking about how people see the healthcare system, and sometimes we don't really have a lot of understanding of the healthcare system. So, for example, when we qualify as nurses, we're normally told to go and work within a hospital or an acute setting. Now, when you're told to go and work in an acute setting, most student nurses, when they hear that, they think, I have to work for the NHS and I have to work in a hospital. But my part of what I want to do here is create that awareness that acute settings can be both primary and secondary. You can find that in the community and you can find that in the hospitals. Thank you so much, Ruth, for joining me. It has been a very informative session today. It had me thinking back on my experience as a nurse. I think it was very valuable. And I think people will learn a lot, especially managers. I think today has been one that isn't just for staff nurses, but also for leaders, managers, anyone that is looking to progress within their roles. So thank you so much for joining me on this episode of A Nurse Like Me. And if you could tell people, where can they find you if they're looking for you, if they want consulting, if they want to work with you with TRT, where can they find you?
Yeah, so my social media handle is Ruth A Martey, or Ruth A Agyemang Martey. So you can find me on Instagram. I do personal coaching, career coaching with people. I also am in a ministry called Besete Elion. So if you are in Christian faith, you can connect with us there as well. And of course, train and retain talent, to support and optimize your workforce. Have us for your away day, speaking engagements, or even just bespoke consultancy service on there. You can reach out on me on there as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ruth. Within the private sector, there is no banding. So when you talked about having something that your staff could work towards, I think it's important to know that within that private sector, they look sometimes at people's skill set and either upskill them so they can take on management positions, or they kind of bounce from lower level management to higher level management to very senior leadership roles without a real ladder like you would find with the agenda for change and in the NHS. So that's one of the reasons why I love working within the private sector, because your chance of progression is far higher than it would be under a step ladder progression. But I do think there are benefits, like you've pointed out, within the having a ladder of progression, because one of the things with not having a ladder, you kind of do have that space where people feel stuck because they reach the highest point within that particular job area. So for example, within nursing in the NHS, you've got your band 2s, 3, 4. Band 5 is when you become a nurse now. 6 is like beginner level leadership. 7, you're more senior leader. 8, you're a very senior, and then you've got your 8A, 8B, 8C, and so on and so forth. Within the community is based on the job title. There is no band 4, 3. It's just based on the title and your experience. So sometimes you'll find people go from team leader to registered manager within a space of 6 months. But then a registered manager in the hospital setting or in the NHS they may not necessarily come from a team leader position, because in order for them to get that role, there are certain skill set that they have to prove that they have. And the biggest one is leadership and management. So I guess the point I'm making is that invest in your staff, invest in them. Don't be afraid to upskill them. Don't be afraid to pour into them what would make them better and what would make them want to work for you, because that aspect, I think, isn't spoken about a lot. You know, you kind of, so I had a really bad experience with someone who was supposed to be a very close manager to me. And with that particular person, it was very much a lot of micromanagement and, you know, kind of hovering around to see what you're doing. One of the difficulties that I found as a worker in that role is that I felt like I was doing 10 people's jobs. I wasn't getting paid 10 people's salaries. And then the expectation was that I do those 10 different roles in the best possible way in each, but then that's spreading me in, you know, 10 different directions. There is no way you're going to get quality work when you're bombarding someone and overloading them with so many responsibilities. So one of the things I learned is that I have to set professional boundaries so that I work within my limits. And that was a real struggle that I think sometimes when it comes to staff and managing people, we don't often pick up, especially in small businesses. We want to get things done and we don't always have the time. So we probably put it on the deputy managers, put everything on their desk that we can't do as directors. But I think your organization is brilliant because it's going to look at things like that. Are you overloading your staff with too much work that they can't give you quality work? They can't produce the type of work that you would be, you know, happy to receive because they're being stretched. And I think you mentioned that as well. They're being stretched too far. So thank you so much for highlighting those things. I think one of the things that I enjoyed listening to is, you know, the optimizing workforce, retaining staff, training them, the workshops that you guys offer in trying to motivate the team, and actually helping managers to kind of look and think about their organization from a development standpoint, you know. So thank you so much for highlighting that. Do you have any final thoughts? Is there anything that you think would be useful that you want to kind of conclude on?
Yes, I just wanted to actually add to you mentioning that you know, within the private sector, there's no banding, and you know, managers not being afraid to invest in their staff. And I think that is key, not to be afraid of investing in your staff, because some people or some managers feel like if I invest in my staff too much, and they're going to leave. Well, the amount of time I've seen managers who do invest in their staff, even when it comes to a point where maybe naturally the organization can't help them progress, when they do leave, they do come back. People tend to come back to organizations that they had a good experience with. You didn't come back to an employer that you had a sour taste in your mouth with, but an employer that you know, okay, this employer's been great. You know, I was able to develop there. And then as they even gain more skills outside, they're more inclined to come back at a different position. So never be afraid to invest in your staff because the output is massive. And then also, I do get this asked by private sector organizations, you know, as we come in to support you as consultants, you know, that is a business write-off too. A business expense write-off, because this is a training that you are offering to your staff members. So whereas the public sector, you know, obviously with budgets and accounting to the government, it's a bit different, but then with private sectors as well, that is something that is a company expense that you could write off.
Thank you for highlighting that, because I think that's really important. A lot of people don't know that some of the things that they pay for, they can write it off as business expenses. Sometimes people pay out of their own pockets instead of using business money to pay for things. And I'm always having to tell people, no, that's what the business money is there for. It's there for you to use, so you don't have to go within your own personal budgets. I did have a question that I wanted to ask, because it was asked of me, and you're in HR, so I think it's probably important that we also highlight this. And it was around kind of sickness and, you know, the way that is normally seen within the professional setting. I think there is this connotation around working as somebody with possibly a disability, or if you're a loved one who is a carer for somebody, or if you're someone with a long-term medical condition but you want to get out there and be employed, what does that look like for employers? Because I've had somebody come to me and ask me about what positions they can apply for. They have a long-standing health condition and they just worry that they're not going to get work. And in fact, they mentioned to me that they had a call back from a manager regarding a certain position, and they explained to this manager that they're a carer for their unwell loved one. And since revealing that information, in the quest of understanding whether or not this position would be suitable to their lifestyle, because they have to obviously care for this loved one, and so they kind of have to assess whether it's worth going to the interview and even putting an offer through, if it's worth it. Because again, if it doesn't align with their lifestyle, then they're just not going to bother applying for just going ahead and doing it. And they basically said that after they revealed that information, that they're a carer, they never got a call back. But that manager basically wanted to promote them within a different role in the organization based on their skill set. As soon as they found out that this person was a carer, their tone changed. And then they said, oh, okay, no worries, we'll call you back in a few days to confirm things, and never called back. They tried to kind of call to get feedback, like what happened, I haven't received anything back. And there was just no feedback, there was nothing. And it seemed as though the impression they got was they felt that they would be a liability to this company, being that they're not as free to work as somebody that maybe isn't a carer. But I wanted to have your thoughts on that, because that's something that I see a lot of, is just people, who aren't, have a condition, long-term condition, or a loved one that they look after, and that are not really given the space or the opportunities as someone who maybe isn't in that same position.
Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, sometimes there is this unconscious bias that some managers have in organizations like the NHS. That's why I do like the private sector, but this particular aspect I do like the public sector for is that they have this accountability to be inclusive. So they ought not to discriminate if you are a carer, or if you're a man, a woman, disabled or not disabled, black or brown, or white. They ought to not be biased, in the books. Unfortunately, some organizations are just don't have trained managers like that. I do think it's important to research the organization that you are applying for, so that you have an organization that actually supports you, because I think it's better even that they declined at this stage than working within an organization that is not open-minded, that does not support inclusivity. So, for instance, there's a lot of NHS trusts that I know of that every single manager has to conduct unconscious bias training. There's an organization that I know where you need to have inclusion reps. So part of the organization that I work in, I am an inclusion rep. So I attend interview panels, and I ensure that the interview is conducted in a non-discriminatory way and is inclusive. So organizations like that is an organization you would want to work for. Often in the about section of the organization, they will really highlight that, because that's something to be proud of. To say that we are a inclusive employer, this is our policy. Those are the organizations you would want to go for. Yeah, so I would always say, be honest. Don't hide that information, because at the end of the day, you want to be in a place that right from the beginning supports that. There are many roles where it even says in the job interview, in the application, sorry, it says, do you have a disability? And if you tick yes, there's a sub question that can come up and say, we are a inclusive employer. Would you like to be opted into a guaranteed interview as a disabled person? And you can tick yes. That is, if you meet the minimum requirements, they will call you for an interview. So so these are the type of organizations you would want to work with, because at the end of the day, you spend most of your life at your workplace, and so you want to be in a place that's supportive. So I do encourage being open and honest. To be honest.
Thank you so much for that. And I think that's something I can definitely relay back to them. I do appreciate the NHS for that. I think there are positives and negatives in any area of work, but there are certain things within the NHS that I do value a lot, even when it comes to things like sick pay and stuff like that. The holiday entitlements, private sectors can pretty much do whatever they want. If they want to give you 18 days, no one can stop them. Whereas the NHS, it is a standard, and everyone has that same standard. I know trusts have their different regulations and their different policies, but I do know that the NHS is regarded very highly, and it's definitely, you see, the thing is, I feel like it's debatable, because there are some people that also have experienced the other side with the NHS, just like I can say I've experienced the other side with private sectors. I've only worked for the NHS as a nurse, let's say. I worked for the NHS as a support worker for 3 years, but I've only worked for the NHS as a nurse for about 3 months. The rest of my career has been private sector roles. So I can't really speak much about the NHS and the support that they provide to nurses. But I do see online there is a huge amount of support that they have available for people who progress. Whether you're a nurse, there's leadership trainings, there's, they really do invest in their nurses. And I think you hit the nail on the head when you said about your progression is your responsibility, because I think that's the difference between someone who has a goal in mind, and I think you mentioned that, having something to aim for, having a goal in mind, someone who has that goal in mind versus someone who's kind of systematically doing something and expecting a different result, and I think it's that proactivity, that if I want to be a band 8B, what do I need to do to get to that place? I shouldn't just be doing everything that I can on the ward, but not positioning myself in a place to be promoted. You just going above and beyond isn't going to be enough for you to get that promotion, because the people that are proactive, going to networking events, getting to know the leaders, the higher ups, those people are the ones that are being seen. So I think there is that there is a lot to be said, and I think we could probably talk on all day about this staffing stuff, but I just took on the fact that you have to know what you want. You shouldn't be afraid to go after what you want, but develop a plan about how you're going to get there. And also another thing I said was, study the job description. If there's any gaps, then figure out how to attain those skills. If there's any you know, any development that needs to be had, figure out how you're going to get those developments so that you can go for those roles. And sometimes it's just making your managers aware. You know, there was this one support worker that the lady that I work with, she's also at the same level as me. She mentioned that this support worker went and paid privately for a particular type of training so she can do her job at the best of her ability. She didn't even wait for her managers to do it, because she knew if she had to do it through the company, it would take long just to prove something she could just pay for herself. So she just went ahead and did that. And now she's been promoted within her role. She's still manager within that placement, but she's been given a more clinical leadership role within that place because she went and attained those skills. No one asked her to do it. She was proactive. She knew exactly what she wanted, and she went for it.
Also add that if you are working in the NHS, do you take advantage of the vastness that the NHS is? Because you're literally not just confined to the hospital that you work in. There's a network of hospitals that you have access to. I regularly attend OD forums where we have Bob White's OD consultants on there, you know, across the entire country. You know, those forums, they're very informative. You're able to build connections. You can directly talk to people from another trust and share ideas and develop learning. So, and there's plenty of those events going on constantly. So don't be in a shell. Do network, do reach out to people, because it's a vast network that you can access.